So, I'm going to talk a bit about my sectioning today. So, I've started by creating a triangular subsection for my fringe. And I'm customizing that to my client's needs. Obviously, wider section for our client that has a little less density through the recession line. I've also gone in and created a round section that covers the entire crown of the head, and then I've sectioned off everything else above the parietal ridge through the top. And then just sectioned off everything below just to get it out of the way, keep my sections nice and clean. As you know, the cleaner our sections are, the cleaner our cut's going to be. Sectioning is super important to creating a really clean cut, keeping that other hair out of our way so that we're only focusing on what we're working with at the time. So I'm going to get started. So today I'm going to start with the subsection that is taking over my crown. And I'm just going to start by prepping again with the Moroccan Oil All-in-One Leave-In Conditioner. That's going to help me detangle the hair, help my shears move through with the slide cutting. Now, I'm going to break this section in half. Let's get that leave-in conditioner worked through there. Help me detangle a little bit more. And then I'm just going to go in and split this subsection in half. So what I'm doing is creating two kind of half moon sections, and I'm splitting that right through the center crown. Now, because I'm only working with half of this section at a time, I want to clip the other section out of my way. Again, creating nice clean sections is going to help me create a cleaner cut, right? It's going to help me control the hair more, and then it's just going to get that out of my way. So I'm going to start today by creating a guideline for my cut. So just in that center crown, I'm going to create just a cut, and it's really going to be a guide for the entire haircut. It's going to be customized for my client at the time. If my client is a little more edgy, I can go shorter with this cut, really create that funky mullet texture through the crown area. If my client's a little more conservative, wants a little more softness and a little less edge, I can go a little longer with that. I want my client today to be a little more edgy, so I'm going to just create this guideline fairly short, right? There we go. Easy does it. So from here, I'm just going to start creating pie-shaped radial subsections, right? So for every part of this section, I'll be using this previously cut guide to determine my length, right? Now, as I'm doing this cut, I'm going to be removing bulk as I go, just by going in and doing some slide cutting within the interior of that subsection, right? Now, there are a couple ways that I can go from here. If I wanted a little bit of a stronger line throughout my crown area, I could go in and just do some point cutting, right? Today I want things to be a little more fluid, a little more airy and textured, so I'm just going to do some slide cutting, right? And I'm being mindful, as I'm doing this, I'm actually creating some convex layering. So shorter to longer for all of that cutting, and just going in and just a fluid movement, short to long. Now, as I'm moving through this, number one, I'm going to make sure I'm getting that previously cut hair out of my way. I'm also just going to be picking up that guideline that I've already set for my entire cut, being mindful of my finger positioning as I move through this so that I'm creating more length as I move throughout the cut, right? And just gonna go in, make it a little easier for myself, have my client tip their head down so that I can get in and do that slide cutting to remove bulk as I go. And then just short to long. I'm cutting inside my fingers. I'm really not super concerned with making sure everything is like super even. I know that I'm using the same hand positioning for all of the cut. I'm making sure my finger positions are staying the same and creating that concave layer as I go, right? And just slide cutting. Again, I've used that Moroccan oil all-in-one leave-in conditioner, and that's going to help my shears really move through the hair very easily. Continuing around with that radial parting, creating that pie subsection, adjusting my client so that it's easier for me to access the hair that I'm cutting, removing bulk as I go, and then slide cutting within my fingers. It's just going to create a really nice, soft finish to the hair. I'm also not super concerned about taking small sections. If I have some over direction within my sectioning, it's just going to create a little more texture and a little more movement within that cut, right? This mullet style has a lot of texture in the back, right? We don't have to be super precise because we want that textured look within the style, right? As long as I am maintaining the same finger positioning throughout, I know that my sections are going to be pretty even. I can go in and just use my hands, use my feel to make sure that my sections are pretty even, make sure I don't have anything that's like way off balance, but again, having a little extra texture within this cut is going to be just fine. So once I've moved through that back subsection within the crown, I can move to the top of it. Just going to add a bit more of the all-in-one leave-in conditioner to help me glide through the hair more easily, also to help me detangle. And that's going to be for all hair types. Every client can use this every day to help control porosity, to help gently detangle. So again, I'll be creating radial partings, radial subsections within the crown area, and I'll be using that guideline that I cut at the beginning of the cut right in the center crown, right? That's going to determine the entire cut. Just going to turn her around so that I can access a little better for you guys to see, for you all to see. And again, finding that guideline that I created at the beginning and using that to determine the length from here. Once again, I'm going to go in and do some slide cutting to help remove bulk and help create that texture that I want throughout the cut as I go along. Now I'm going to go in at the end, of course, and do a little more texturizing and do a little more customization to the cut at the end. But I want to do some of the work as I'm going through, right? Make it a little easier for me at the end, right? So finding that guideline, again, being mindful that my finger positioning is creating that nice layering, right? And just gently slide cutting through that. Now when I'm slide cutting, I'm not just pushing through the hair with my shears. If we're doing that, we need to be mindful that our shears are really sharp. Otherwise, we can start to rip through the hair a little bit too much and create unwanted texture, the wrong kind of texture, right? Create damage within the cut. That's not what we're going for here. We want to create texture, but also maintain the health of the hair, right? So pushing that previously cut hair out of the way, again, finding that guideline, removing bulk, creating texture within the interior of the hair, and then slide cutting. And see how I'm kind of barking my shears as I move through the hair, right? So you can see I'm starting to get lots of texture within that crown area. Just move through this last bit here really quickly. Same thing, slide, 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 and there we go. So it's a pretty big day for me here. I'm here in Atlanta in my home studio, and today is actually my 40th birthday. And I'm glad to be sharing it with you all. Had a really great weekend. Really great weekend with some really great friends, and excited to be capping it off with everyone here today. So again, creating that pie-shaped radial subsection. Gonna go in, turn her around. Tip her a bit for you all to see. Finding that guideline cut, moving through the hair, opening and closing my shears as I do this so that I'm not tearing the hair, I'm not creating any unwanted damage or breakage through those ends, right? We want to maintain the integrity of our client's hair, because if not, they're not going to want to keep coming back to us, right? Nobody wants to leave the salon with a haircut with split ends, right? So last piece here, my previously cut guide is there, creating texture within that cut, and then slide cutting. Now, once I've created that fun texture throughout the crown, I'm gonna go in, skip over this next section, and move straight to my fringe area. And the reason I wanna do that is I'm gonna connect my fringe length to my crown length in this subsection. So I want to have those done already so that I can connect the dots and make the haircut a little more fluid. Once again, I'm always making sure, number one, that my section is nice and saturated with water, and also using that all-in-one leave-in as a cutting guide. It's really going to help me glide through, help my shears glide through the hair as I go. So I've got a triangular subsection here, and within that, I'm just going to create another second triangular subsection, right? Now, as with that previous section, I'll be removing bulk from this as I go by using slide cutting. This is going to be a nice, fun, textured fringe. Going to have a lot of pieciness. So I'm going to go in and create a horizontal subsection, just right in that center. And I'm going to determine from here how short I want my fringe to be. Keeping in mind that, of course, when the hair is dry, it's going to bounce up more. And keeping in mind that I'm not using a lot of tension as I'm cutting this, right? If I'm using a lot of tension when I'm cutting fringe, it's going to bounce back even more, and then you got a baby doll bang, which is great. Not what we're going for necessarily today, right? So just combing that down and being mindful of where I want my length of my fringe to be, right? So minimal tension, going in and slide cutting on both sides, right? I have that end point in mind as I'm cutting this. I'm aiming for just between her brows with my length, and I'm going in and slide cutting just down on both sides to that length that I have predetermined, right? So from here, I'm going to go in and over direct this next subsection, this horizontal subsection within my fringe area to that same point, right? I don't need to join that. I don't need to use a guide from the previously cut section because I know what my end predetermined length is, right? I'm aiming for just between her brows, and I'm over directing that so that it starts to create a little roundness to the fringe, right? And just going in and slide cutting down to that length that I want, that length that I've predetermined, and creating a nice textured fringe, but also starting to build up a little, the first comb drop of the haircut. Good thing I've got extras on the side. Now I can go in from here and see if I have any inconsistencies or any heavy areas, and just go ahead and start to work through those as I go, right? Creating lots of texture here, so can never do too, well, you can do too much sometimes, so I won't say that, but we're creating texture here today. So if you've just joined me today, second comb drop of the haircut, keeping an extra on the side. It happens to us all, right? So if you've just joined today, I'm doing my version of the Shullet haircut. It's going to be a combination of a shag and a mullet, and I'm using a lot of slide cutting, and I'll be using some point cutting as well to create lots of texture within my cut and remove bulk and give a nice edgy finish to the cut. So you can see I'm getting lots of texture in that fringe area, and I'm starting to build up a little more weight out toward the exterior of my fringe area. So just gonna drop down this next triangular subsection. Again, I don't necessarily need to use the previously cut hair as a guide. Remember, I have a predetermined length that I have mapped out from the beginning. So I know where I'm cutting. I don't have to use the previously cut hair as a guide because I know that I'm using a guide of between her brows, right? So just going in again and slide cutting down to that predetermined length, being mindful that I'm not using a lot of tension here because I don't want it to bounce back too much, right? And just working from side to side to create nice textured finish throughout my fringe area. And there we go. Again, working with horizontal vertical subsections within my fringe area. I'm over directing this to my center so that I'm building up a weight line throughout as I move to the outside of my fringe, to that recession line, right? And working on both sides to create nice texture within that cut. How's everyone liking this so far? You think you can use the slide cutting techniques? I use lots of slide cutting to create softness, to remove bulk, to add texture. Again, I'm over directing this hair in the exterior of my section to that center just between the brow to create a little bit of weight, a little bit of length as I move to the outside of my fringe area. Working on both sides with my shears to create nice texture. Now obviously I'm cutting from behind today because I want you all to be able to see what I'm doing, but normally I would be working in front of my client because it's an easier access point. So, you know, sometimes we gotta be a little awkward when we're showing you how to do a haircut, but make it work, right? Just continuing to work within that second triangle that I've created, over directing that to the center of her brows, to that predetermined length guide, being mindful of my tension, and just sliding on both sides to remove bulk and create texture within my fringe. There we go. One last piece. Not using any of the previously cut hair. In fact, I kind of pushed that out of my way so that I get really easier access to my cutting line, right? Pushing that hair out of the way, number one, so that I'm not cutting the hair that I previously cut. Over directing to that center of the brow, being mindful that I don't have too much tension, and slide cutting and slide cutting. And there we go. Nice textured fringe area. And now I can go in and connect the hair that I've cut through my crown to my fringe area throughout the top. Again, always working with that Moroccan Oil All-in-One Leave-In Conditioner as a cutting agent, as a detangler. It's going to really help my shears glide through without creating any unwanted type of texture. Right? So I'm going to create a vertical subsection that's going to run just through the center of the crown. And I'm going to do a guideline for the rest of the hair above the parietal ridge by using the length from my fringe area and the length from my crown as a guide, right? So going in, once again, removing bulk as I go by slide cutting. Now, when I'm slide cutting through the top of the hair, or slide cutting in general, I want to be mindful with which direction my shears are facing. We all know that short hair pushes long hair, so if I want to create a little more texture, a little more lift through this crown area, then I want to move my shears away from the face, and that's going to create shorter hair underneath that will push that other hair on top of it up. If I'm wanting to remove more bulk, I want to move toward the face, and that's going to help things, help remove a little more density and help things lay a little more flat to the head, right? So today I'm all about that texture. Remember, we're doing that Shullet haircut. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to slide cut away from the face to help create lift and create texture within my cut. Then I'm going to go, once again, finding the previously cut length from my crown and previously cut length from my fringe area. Get off of there. And I'm going to point cut, right? And the reason I'm point cutting here is just gives me a little more texture within my finish and gives me a little more strength through this, through the crown, right? I want that kind of heavy fringe to create a nice edgy look. Again, I'm gonna go in and do some slide cutting, some dry cutting at the end, so I can remove a little unwanted bulk at the end if I want to. All right, so from here, I'm going to start over directing this hair to my guide. Now, as I've done with the rest of the cut, I am going to remove that bulk within the interior, create that texture. And as I'm doing this, I want to be mindful that I'm not going too far in. Remember, I'm meeting this previously cut hair, and I don't want to cut hair that I've already cut. I don't want to remove more bulk from that interior because I've already done it, right? So as I'm slide cutting, I'm almost keeping my shear on the outside of this section, right? So that I'm not removing any bulk from the spots that I've already done it. Again, going in, over directing this subsection to that guideline that I have just created. And I'm going to, there's my guide, and I'm just going to point cut. Being mindful not to work past that second knuckle because I don't want to cut myself today. The first time I went live on Instagram, I was doing a razor cut, and within literal minutes of starting my presentation, I sliced my finger open with my razor and started bleeding excessively throughout the rest of the cut. It was quite a disaster. I didn't have any Band-Aids handy either. Lesson learned on that. Always keep a Band-Aid handy when you're going live on Instagram cutting, right? So, again, over directing, using the previously cut hair as my guideline, and I'm going to keep my shears on the outside of this subsection as I slide cut to remove that density so that I'm not removing weight, removing excess weight from hair that I've already cut, from those sections within the interior that I've already cut. Then going in, getting all the hair off my comb, first and foremost, over directing to that center guideline, and then point cutting. And what this is doing is, again, working short to long. Remember, we're creating layers throughout So short to long, building up weight, creating that softness through the building softness around the face, right? Convex layering. Remove that bulk, removing the bulk. Again, I have that Moroccan Oil all-in-one leave-in conditioner that's working as a really amazing cutting agent for me today. Over directing that to my guideline at the center of the crown and point cutting. Last little bit here. You can see I'm starting to get lots of texture, but also a nice, fun, heavy fringe, lots of weight. I want a little edge to my mullet, so I want to create a little bit of a heavier, a little more hair moving toward the front, right? Just going to continue working here. Again, over directing to that guideline that I've cut. Slide cutting to create texture and also to remove density within that line. Being mindful that my shears are staying away from the hair that I have cut previously. And over directing and point cutting. Last section here, above the parietal, over direct to that previously cut guideline, slide cut, again, making sure that I'm opening and closing my shears so that I'm not creating any damage while I'm cutting, right? Not creating unwanted texture, the wrong kind of texture. Keeping that integrity of the hair. There's good texture and bad texture for sure. We want to keep good texture here. Point cutting to finish off this subsection. All right, starting to get a little mullety, especially once we let down these sides, right? I have a mullet myself, so I'm in love with mullets these days. So I'm trying to do them as often as I can. As often as I can find a client who wants a mullet, I try to create it. So let's work on creating that face framing, right? Start working on creating more of a mullet shape. So I'm gonna let down these sides. Just gonna adjust here for you all to see just a little better. There we go. So again, from here we're able to customize this cut for our client's specific needs. Look at that texture, it looks great, huh? So I'm going to have a consultation with my client. How edgy are you? Talk to them about their style, talk to them about whose hair they're liking, and customize this cut for them from there, right? I can keep a little more weight around the face if I want to make it more of a shag and less of a mullet, or I can go in and take more length around the face and really have that true party in the front. Or, yeah, business in the front, party in the back. Isn't that the old saying? So I'm just gonna go in, create a diagonal back subsection. I'm gonna be mindful that I want to keep some hair in my recession line, because what I'm going to do is just connect this front to my length, right? So diagonal back subsection. Today we're going for the full mullet. So I'm going to take some length off of this front. Being mindful that how much elevation I use is going to determine how much length comes off, right? Now, I'm going to be slide cutting with this. Let me get my all-in-one leave-in conditioner and not spray it in my face. Again, using this as a really great cutting agent today. If you're not using this in the salon when you're cutting, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So again, I'm going to just connect the dots, right? Connecting that front, that previously cut hair. You see I've already started to get that graduation. And as before, I'm going to be using slide cutting beforehand just to create texture and remove bulk, start to create that pieciness within the cut, right? Now finding my guide, and I'm just going to start slide cutting to remove length, right? And as I'm doing this, I'm moving my fingers away and pulling that section down so that I am maintaining a bit of that length. Moving on to the next subsection, diagonal back, parting, pushing that uncut hair, clipping it out of the way. Once again, removing bulk and weight by slide cutting beforehand, being mindful that I don't cut the hair, don't remove bulk from the section that I've already cut. Get that out of there. Now I can go in, find that previously cut hair, use that as a guide, and just start to slide cut. Now, as I did before, I'm being mindful that I'm not cutting the hair that I've previously cut, right? And the way that I'm doing that is kind of positioning my shears on top of my section as I'm cutting. So not much left to cut here. Just got a little piece right here. Going to let the back down a bit and start to connect that as well. Now, once again, when I am using slide cutting techniques, I want to make sure that the hair is nice and saturated. I'm not trying to force my shears through half dry hair, right? That's when we start to create unwanted, that bad texture that I was talking about, that unwanted texture that makes your client question why they came to you, right? All-in-one leave-in conditioner. And I'm just going to continue with those diagonal back partings to connect the front to the back. Over directing everything forward. Again, removing bulk, being mindful that I'm staying away from that previously cut hair as to not remove weight from previously cut sections. I've already done that. Over directing everything and slide cutting. I'm just gonna keep doing this, these diagonal back partings, moving all the hair toward the front and connecting it, right? Being mindful of my elevation and cutting inside my fingers. Diagonal back, removing weight, keeping my shears on top of that so as to not disturb previously cut hair. And bringing everything to that guide, that length guide that I've already cut, and slide cut. Starting to get nice and mullety here for us, right? Now I can go in and customize a bit more in the end and create more texture, remove more weight as I go. So, just gonna finish up with this side. Don't really have much left to cut here, right? So once I've gotten to that point, I'm gonna stop. And I'm going to start connecting the top to the bottom a little more, right? So what I'm gonna do for that is just go in and create diagonal forward subsections. I'm going to find my guideline, my previously cut hair from the crown area. I'm going to find my previously cut length guide and just going to connect those two, right? Diagonal forward, getting a little elevation there, finding the previously cut length from the top. Here's my previously cut from the bottom, and just slide cutting. Being mindful, I'm dropping that elevation as I move down so as to not disturb that perimeter line, right? I'm just gonna move all the way through the side doing this, connecting that top to the length guide. Here's my previously cut, and dropping, 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 so that I don't take weight out of my perimeter line. She's looking pretty good, huh? All right, so I can continue doing this technique, connecting the top to the perimeter all the way around, right? As I'm working, I'm dropping, dropping, dropping. Can do the same thing all the way into the back. Now, just for timing's sake, I'm not gonna cut the other side. I've got a lady already finished for you, so I can show you some finishing techniques here. Again, elevating, finding my previously cut guide, and just slide cutting and dropping my elevation as I go to protect my perimeter line. Looking like a mullet, huh? So obviously, I can customize the length for my client as well. If they want to have that really long, fully disconnected mullet, I can leave these long pieces, right? Or I can create a little bit of a stronger perimeter line just by going in and point cutting at the end and determining where my client wants her length to end up, right? All about customizing for our client's needs. Previously cut guide, slide cutting, and dropping that elevation as I go to protect that perimeter length. Just gonna finish up here in the back so that I can show you how I will remove some bulk from this, some weight from the hair below the occipital, or below the parietal ridge. Slide cut, slide cut, slide cut. Maintaining the perimeter. So from here, if I feel like I need to take a little more density out of the cut, add a little more texture through the interior in the back, I can just do some more slide cutting techniques, right? I've already finished this section. I can go in, have my client tilt her head down just a bit. I can over direct everything up, and then being mindful of my perimeter line, not to cut from there, but just do more slide cutting to create more texture and remove density from the back. Right? All about the texture with this haircut. We want that fun, like kind of rock and roll mullet, right? What do you all think? You liking it? All right, so I'm gonna move on. I've got a lady already finished here. Gotten her dried, and I want to talk with you just a bit about some dry cutting techniques. Now, if you remember, I wanted to create a little more of a little more weight in the front. That's why I did point cutting versus slide cutting to create a little more weight moving toward the front hairline. Now, she's pretty heavy here still, so I'm gonna go in and start to remove a little bit of bulk and just add a little more texture in. A couple ways I can do this. I can go in and do some deep point cutting, right? I can also go in and undercut this a bit if I want, just by slide cutting under here, moving away so that I'm not removing too much of this length, but just removing some bulk from underneath the length here, right? Because I still want that heaviness in the front. I just maybe want a little bit more texture. So undercutting that, moving my hands out, moving my fingers back so that I'm protecting that length there. I could also go in and just work my shears from side to side by doing some channel cutting to remove weight. If I'm doing channel cutting, I always try to do it both ways so that I get a little more movement in both directions. So starting one way and then moving the other direction. I can also start working on a little more customization for my client, right? Does she want things to be a little softer, like a little more length around her face? Or does she want to like fully rock and roll the mullet, right? She's still got a little more length around the face. If I wanted to, I could go in and just start to customize that as well, right? I can do more slide cutting to remove more length. I could create a little more customization, a little more disconnection here by going in and breaking this up, right? Removing that bulk. Once again, I am being mindful as I'm slide cutting that I'm moving my shears as I go. If our shears are not really sharp, we're going to end up causing a little more bad texture versus the good texture that we want, right? Always trying to create good texture for our clients because we don't want them to leave with damaged hair, right? I can go in and add a little more texture to these ends, right? She's got a nice strong perimeter line, but if I wanted to go in and soften that a bit, like really make it rock and roll, I can do that same elevating technique that I did before, just by creating vertical subsections within that, creating a little bit of elevation, and then slide cutting. Right, I can also go in and do the same slide cutting technique within the interior by going in underneath and removing excess weight. Notice when I'm cutting inside my fingers, I'm always moving my hand away from my shear so that I'm not snipping my fingers. All right, so now that we've finished up with our texturizing techniques, I will talk a bit about some finishing. So I did go in, once again, I started by prepping the hair with the Moroccan Extra Volume shampoo and conditioner to cleanse the hair as well as give it a little added boost. I have used the Moroccan All-in-One Leave-In Conditioner to help add manageability, help to detangle, evens out porosity. I've gone in with the Moroccan Oil Volumizing Mist, applied that globally from root to ends, and then I just flat wrapped her using a Denman brush and a blow dryer, moving side to side to create that volume. Now I'm going to go in with my iron and just start to create some fun texture within my style, right? I'm going to start by just flat ironing everything above the parietal ridge forward, right? Using a comb and just moving that all forward. Remember, I wanted this fun weight line, that fun hair all through the top to be moving forward toward the fringe area. So, using my flat iron to help move that hair forward. I'll continue that all throughout the top, and then I'm going to create some fun waves on the side, right? Just going to create some horizontal subsections on the side, comb through that hair, get my flat iron, elevate just about 45 Take my flat iron in, get so that you all can see just a little better. Right, maybe there. I think that should do it. And just rock back and forth to create a fun wave technique, right? Continue this throughout the sides, rocking back and forth. And then I can go in and finish with some styling products, all right? A couple things I'm gonna use today for styling. I'm gonna use the Moroccan molding cream through the top. And that's just going to create some nice soft texture, give it a little bit of a matte finish, and create some pieciness throughout the top. Give a little extra texture and lift. Nice pieciness, nice rock and roll. Gonna go in with my Moroccan oil dry texture spray to create a little grit and expansion through the side. Short bursts. And there we have it. So that is my Shullet haircut. Thanks everyone for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Just a quick recap. We used some slide cutting techniques and point cutting techniques today to create lots of texture within our haircut, starting at the perimeter, moving to our fringe, and then connecting the dots and slide cutting throughout to connect our top to our perimeter. Thanks for joining today.